and disturbing going on in the street, I tend to be drawn to it.
For a while, it felt like James Spader just vanished. One minute, he was everywhere, unsettling audiences, stealing scenes, leaving that strange, lingering feeling long after the credits rolled. Then, almost without warning, the phone stopped ringing. No big farewell, no dramatic comeback. And now, with no new projects in sight, that familiar question drifts back in. Why did James Spader step away from Hollywood? And why did he never seem all that bothered about coming back? The childhood that shaped the darkness. James Spader's childhood unfolded right on the edge of a classroom. He grew up in faculty housing at the Brooks School, a prep school where his father taught English. His mother taught art at another school nearby. And later, James was sent to Phillips Academy in Andover, one of the most elite high schools in the country. So on paper, he was surrounded by privilege and education. In reality, life was a lot more modest than it looked. There wasn't much extra money in the house. 2 teachers raising a family on school salaries meant things were always a little tight. And there's a quiet irony there too, because even with all that education around him, Spader wasn't some model student. He was restless, disruptive, and fully aware of it. He later described himself as a terrible student, the kind who struggled to sit still and follow the rules. So he found other ways to stay busy. And by busy, that meant hustling. By the time he was about 10 years old, he was already trying to make money however he could. He ran errands, babysat, sold whatever he could get his hands on, and even set up a little stand outside his house selling frozen juice concentrate. At one point, he tried his hand at journalism too, putting together a one-issue campus newspaper with national news, local sports, and his own drawings. It wasn't about building a resume, it was about survival, curiosity, and that early instinct to make something, sell something, or become something. Through all of this, his parents stayed deeply supportive. He always spoke about how much they cared for their kids and how seriously they took their role as parents. He especially admired his father, who ran the dorm where James lived. His dad had a reputation for being fair, calm, and respectful, the kind of adult students didn't want to disappoint. Even kids who caused trouble everywhere else would somehow behave in his dorm. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Then something shifted when Spader found the stage. Once he started acting, he didn't just get better, he locked in. Acting gave him focus in a way school never had. It felt like the first thing in his life that truly fit. And once that happened, school started to feel like a distraction instead of a path forward. So at 17, he made a bold move. He dropped out and went straight to New York City to chase acting full-time. The dream was big. The reality was rough. There were no instant breakthroughs, no overnight success. There were just auditions, rejection, and a stack of strange jobs to keep himself afloat. He shoveled horse manure at stables. He took whatever work paid. And then there was the yoga job. He somehow ended up teaching yoga without knowing anything about yoga. No training, no certification, no clue. He took the job because the hours were flexible and the environment was appealing. His method was simple and completely improvised. He dimmed the lights, turned up the heat, talked people into poses he invented on the spot, and sometimes even fell asleep while doing it. It was ridiculous, it was honest, and it was survival. That blunt honesty followed him into his career. He never pretended acting was some sacred calling. He was open about the fact that he worked a lot, sometimes too much, and often out of financial necessity. Many of the roles he took weren't driven by artistic hunger, but by the reality of bills needing to be paid. Still, even under pressure, he tried to choose the best material he could before his bank account forced his hand. And then there was the strange problem he ran into early on. He was too good-looking. He didn't look like the kind of odd-textured character actor he felt like inside. He looked like a leading man. Hollywood saw the face first and the soul second. So when he didn't quite fit the clean hero mold, they placed him in the next best category, the villain, and he ran with it. Throughout the 1980s, Spader built a reputation playing slick, arrogant, morally slippery men. He was the guy you loved to hate. He carried this oily, entitled energy that made his characters feel real and deeply uncomfortable. In Pretty in Pink, his audition was so convincing that the casting director reportedly had a physical reaction of dislike toward him before remembering it was just a performance. That's how effective he was. By the late 80s and into the 90s, he transitioned into leading roles, but never the safe ones. His characters were still strange, sexual, obsessive, and psychologically off-center. He gravitated toward stories about desire, control, intimacy, and the uncomfortable spaces between people. That wasn't accidental. Spader traced much of that back to his upbringing. He grew up in a household that was extremely open, progressive, and unconcerned with modesty. He had 2 older sisters, and the family culture was casual about nudity, privacy, and bodies. Bathroom doors stayed open. Clothes were optional. His home environment taught him early on that sexuality wasn't hidden or shameful. It was just part of life. He later said he couldn't remember a time when sexuality wasn't the lens through which he saw the world. That environment shaped him deeply. Being raised around confident, dominant women also left a mark on how he related to power, attraction, and identity. It gave him a curiosity about human behavior that never really faded. One story from his childhood captures that perfectly. The family had a summer camp that was basically a converted chicken coop made from thin pine boards full of knotholes. His room was next to his sister's, and through those tiny holes in the wall, he became a quiet observer of life, relationships, and moments he probably wasn't meant to see yet. That habit of watching, noticing, and absorbing never really stopped. It just turned into acting when everything finally clicked. For most actors, turning 40 is when the phone starts ringing a little less. For James Spader, it's when things finally clicked into place. He was never the classic ladder climber. He wasn't chasing fame, franchises, or headlines. He took every summer off to be with his kids. He openly admitted that he usually accepted roles when the money ran low and the bills showed up. And yet, somehow, the work kept getting better instead of drying up. The real turning point came in 2002 with Secretary. Spader played E. Edward Gray, a man who mixed emotional distance, control, obsession, and a very specific kind of intimacy into one unsettling package. According to Maggie Gyllenhaal, who played opposite him, the strange energy wasn't something he turned on for the camera. It was there from the first moment. At their very first table read, he barely acknowledged her as a person. He didn't do introductions, he didn't make small talk, he just sat down, looked at her, and stayed there. She felt pulled in and unnerved at the same time. They didn't exchange phone numbers. She knew almost nothing about his real life. Halfway through the shoot, he pulled her aside and told her, slowly and deliberately, that he always had one ally on every project, and on this one, it was her. From that moment on, the dynamic became its own strange performance. They shared a trailer divided by a paper-thin wall. He could hear her breathe. She could hear him move. But instead of just speaking through the wall like a normal human, he would send a production assistant to her door to formally summon her. She would walk the 2 steps over, knock, get invited in, and be offered a piece of chocolate. That became their ritual. A quiet, theatrical echo of the movie they were making. Gyllenhaal later described their relationship as complicated. There were moments of connection and warmth, and other moments when he completely shut her out, which she admitted hurt more than she expected. During press for the film, he once said the only person on set he was interested in was Lee Holloway. That was the character she played. At first, she felt dismissed. Then she realized that in his mind, there was no real separation between actor and role. He wasn't ignoring her, he was only seeing the character. That blurred boundary between performance and personality became a defining part of his reputation. Around the same time, Hollywood quietly figured something else out. Spader's emotional stillness, his calm delivery, and his unsettling composure weren't just great for drama. They were perfect for comedy. That became clear when he joined the practice in its final season as Alan Shore. Alan Shore wasn't just a lawyer. He was brilliant, manipulative, charming, unethical, and deeply self-aware. He got results in ways that made everyone else uncomfortable. His presence completely shifted the tone of the show, and when the season ended, it felt less like a conclusion and more like a setup. That setup became Boston Legal. Spader moved from a late-entry character to the face of the new series, paired with William Shatner as the unhinged legendary Denny Crane. On paper, it shouldn't have worked. Two big personalities, two actors known for chewing scenery, but on screen, they balanced each other perfectly. Spader played the controlled chaos to Shatner's theatrical chaos. One smooth, one explosive, one surgical, one absurd. The chemistry was undeniable, and it turned the show into something rare, a legal drama that could handle heavy themes while still being funny, strange, and surprisingly emotional. The industry noticed. Spader won 2 consecutive Emmys for the role, beating out some of the most respected names on television. And then there's the near miss that almost reshaped comedy history. When Anchorman was being put together, the casting process was messy, experimental, and full of surprises. The creators auditioned widely, tested different combinations, and slowly built the ensemble that would become iconic. What almost no one knew at the time was that James Spader was deeply interested in playing Brick Tamland. Not mildly interested, not curious, obsessed. When the script started circulating, word came back that Spader wanted the role badly. The response from the creative team was disbelief. He didn't fit the expected shape of the character. Brick was loud, empty-headed, chaotic, and cartoonish. Spader was controlled, cerebral, and unsettling. But Spader didn't care. He understood the humor immediately. He saw how funny the character could be and wanted in. He pushed hard for it. The team debated it seriously. They went back and forth. Eventually, they decided that Spader was almost too good, too precise, too sharp for that particular kind of stupidity. They chose Steve Carell instead, and history took its familiar path. Looking back, it's easy to see how Spader in that role would have totally changed the whole vibe of Brick Tamland, the same way he later came in as Robert California on The Office. The casting choice that changed everything. Now, believe it or not, The Office began as a quiet little remake of a British show created by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant. At the time, it felt like a gamble. The original series was painfully awkward, deeply dry, and built around moments most TV shows tried hard to avoid. Gervais, especially, was fascinated by the uncomfortable parts of everyday life. He believed the real drama wasn't in big emotional speeches or explosive arguments, but in the tiny cringe-worthy moments people wish would just disappear. An awkward silence, a bad joke that lands wrong, a social mistake that no one knows how to fix. That strange focus became the heart of the show. Against expectations, that sensibility made the jump across the Atlantic. A talent agent named Ben Silverman saw the British version while in the UK and immediately understood what made it special. By 2005, he had sold the concept to NBC, and the American version was officially in motion. The show found its rhythm thanks to a sharp writing team that included Mindy Kaling and B.J. Novak, and a cast that felt perfectly balanced. Steve Carell and Rainn Wilson brought big, bold comedy, while Jenna Fisher and John Krasinski grounded everything with a more relatable, everyday energy. That mix is what helped turn The Office into a cultural giant. But no run lasts forever. The show's golden era hit a turning point when Steve Carell chose to leave after season 7. He felt Michael Scott's story had reached a natural ending, and once he was gone, the series faced a huge question. How do you replace a character like that? Instead of trying to copy Michael Scott, the producers went in the opposite direction. They introduced someone completely different, and that's where James Spader came in. The path to his casting became clear through Andy Green's book, The Office, the untold story of the greatest sitcom of the 2000s. Everything started with the season 7 finale, Search Committee, which featured a parade of celebrity guest stars auditioning for the manager job. Jim Carrey, Will Arnett, Ray Romano, and Catherine Tate all appeared, but Spader's performance stood out immediately. His character, Robert California, wasn't warm, awkward, or lovable. He was smooth, intense, and unsettling. A confident mystery who felt like he walked in from a completely different show. That contrast made him impossible to ignore. The impact was so strong that the network quickly took interest. NBC executive Bob Greenblatt pushed for Spader to be hired, and the creative team agreed. Writers and producers became fascinated by the strange energy he brought to the set. It was unfamiliar, slightly uncomfortable, and strangely compelling, and they wanted to explore it. Ironically, Robert California was never meant to last. The original plan was for Spader to appear in only 2 short scenes. He was supposed to be just another face in the interview montage, but once the footage came in, that plan fell apart. Even with limited screen time, the character felt alive. He added tension, mystery, and a weird kind of gravity the show hadn't had before. The writers realized they couldn't just let him walk away. Spader was actually into it from the jump. He liked the creative team, vibed with the atmosphere on set, and was totally cool with popping in for a quick appearance. So when the producers came back and asked him to stay on for a longer run, he said yes. Next thing you know, he wasn't just a guest anymore, he was the centerpiece of Season 8. And yeah, a lot of fans would tell you that's also right around when things started to slide downhill. You see, Steve Carell as Michael Scott was one of those rare moments where actor and character melt into the same person. It wasn't just good casting, it was lightning in a bottle. So when Carell walked away after Season 7, whoever came next wasn't just taking over a job, they were stepping into a shadow that felt impossible to live up to. That's the space James Spader walked into in Season 8 as Robert California. And almost immediately you could feel it. Robert California existed in a completely different emotional universe than everyone else in Scranton. The office runs on fast talk, awkward pauses, petty tension, and emotional chaos. People overshare. They get uncomfortable. They spiral. That messiness is the whole point. Robert California didn't play in that space at all. He was calm where everyone else was frantic, slow where everyone else rushed, controlled where everyone else unraveled. He wasn't awkward, he wasn't needy, and he definitely wasn't vulnerable. Instead of getting tangled up in the chaos, he floated above it, cool, distant, and quietly intimidating. And that single difference quietly changed the feel of the show. Spader's performance wasn't bad. In fact, it was technically strong. He was focused, deliberate, and intense, but the character drained energy from scenes rather than feeding into them. Instead of bouncing off the other actors, he often overpowered them. Instead of heightening the comedy, he flattened it. The humor of The Office came from people trying too hard, failing publicly, and desperately wanting approval. Robert California wanted none of that. And without that need, the emotional engine of the show stalled. Even behind the scenes, the fit never fully clicked. Some crew members noticed that Spader worked in long, heavy monologues that didn't always survive the editing process. Others felt that he simply wasn't comfortable playing inside the loose, chaotic rhythm of the show. The cast was used to quick reactions, interruptions, and layered timing. Spader came from a more controlled, dramatic style. And those two approaches didn't always meet in the middle. Spader himself didn't see it that way. From his perspective, most of his work made it on screen, and if it hadn't, he would have adjusted. But around him, the sense grew that something wasn't quite working. Even the people shaping the show visually and tonally felt the tension. The costume team, the writers, and the producers all tried to mold Robert California into something that fit the world of Scranton. But the character resisted grounding. He was designed to unsettle, to feel like a wild card, to stand apart. And in a show built entirely around connection, discomfort, and emotional closeness, standing apart became a problem. That's the core of why the experiment failed. The Office wasn't a show about powerful people dominating rooms. It was about small people trapped in small spaces, desperately trying to matter to each other. Michael Scott worked because he wanted love, approval, laughter, and validation. And he failed at getting all of it in deeply human ways. Robert California didn't want anything from anyone. He watched, judged, and controlled. That made him interesting, but it didn't make him belong. So in the end, James Spader didn't fail. The Office simply wasn't built for James Spader. James Spader disappeared from Hollywood. Now we know why. Apart from a few outliers, James Spader's career has mostly lived just outside the mainstream. His filmography is full of strange, intimate, and often unsettling movies that feel more at home in art house theaters than in megaplexes. Films like Dream Lover, Crash, and Secretary. That choice shaped everything that came after. While other actors chased blockbusters and mass appeal, Spader quietly built a reputation for picking roles based on how interesting they were, not how profitable they looked on paper. Back in the 1980s, that put him in an awkward middle ground. He had the looks of a teen idol, but the instincts of a character actor. He wasn't wired to be the clean-cut hero or the romantic lead. He was drawn to oddballs, misfits, villains, and people with something broken or unsettling under the surface. So instead of becoming a traditional movie star, he carved out a lane of charismatic antagonists and deeply conflicted anti-heroes. It gave him a fascinating body of work, but it also meant he was rarely the first call when a studio wanted a safe, crowd-pleasing lead. Even his biggest commercial success reflects that pattern. His highest-grossing film is Avengers: Age of Ultron, and he doesn't even appear on screen. He voiced Ultron, a cold, menacing artificial intelligence obsessed with destroying humanity. It was pure Spader, intense, strange, memorable, and completely unconventional. Off-screen, his priorities pushed him even further from the traditional Hollywood path. In the late 1980s, he started a family with his first wife, Victoria Keel, and by the early 1990s they had 2 sons. While many actors use that period to accelerate their careers, Spader slowed his down. He wanted to be home. He wanted summers with his kids. So he turned down work, a lot of it, and only accepted roles when the money was good enough or when he actually needed it. That choice created what looks, from the outside, like a quiet or even stalled period. Between his breakout in Sex, Lies, and Videotape and his resurgence with Secretary in 2002, he appeared in relatively few films that left a strong cultural mark. There were projects like Stargate and Wolf, but nothing that kept him constantly in the spotlight. It was a risk. By stepping away on purpose, he ran the danger of being seen as unreliable, unambitious, or simply forgotten. What makes this even more interesting is that Spader has never pretended this was part of some grand master plan. He has openly said the opposite. He has described himself as terrible at managing a career, bad at planning, and completely uninterested in the business side of Hollywood, developing projects, networking, keeping things in the pipeline. He loathes all of it. If he isn't physically on set acting, he would rather not engage with the industry at all. That same casual attitude extends to his finances. He has admitted he is not particularly responsible with money. For years, he would work, earn, spend it, and then find himself back near zero by the time the next job came around. That financial pressure became one of the main reasons he said yes to new roles. It is also what eventually pushed him toward television, which offered steady income and long-term security in a way movies rarely do. Unlike many of his peers from the same era, Spader never became tabloid fodder. There were no public scandals, no headline-grabbing meltdowns, no carefully managed celebrity persona. He has always guarded his private life fiercely. He openly dislikes public appearances, red carpets, interviews, and the performance that comes with fame. He has described premieres as overwhelming and exhausting, something to be endured rather than enjoyed. Even early in his career, he was already uncomfortable with the attention, joking about how out of place and awkward he looked in front of flashing cameras. Instead of living that intensity publicly, he seems to pour it into his work. He has said he is drawn to strange people, unusual personalities, and characters who live on the edges of normal behavior. In many ways, those characters become his way of exploring parts of human nature that he finds fascinating but doesn't want to live out in real life. He also never saw acting as some sacred calling. To him, it started as a hobby, something fun he did alongside a string of odd jobs, until one day it simply became the thing that paid the bills. While others were chasing fame, he was chasing interesting experiences. Acting let him step into other lives, other identities, other situations he would never encounter otherwise. That sense of play never really went away. He has even described his own career as lazy. Not because he doesn't work hard on set, but because he doesn't want to work constantly. He values living more than he values visibility. He prefers long gaps between projects. He likes disappearing. When he works, he gives everything. When he doesn't, he truly doesn't. That intensity, however, comes with its own complications. Spader has a reputation for being difficult, demanding, and extremely particular. He is known to be sensitive to tiny details that others wouldn't even notice. He has spoken openly about obsessive tendencies and how they affect his behavior on set. That hyperfocus is part of what makes him so compelling on screen, but it can also make collaboration challenging. Co-stars have described him as someone who will stop a scene if something feels even slightly wrong. An entrance that doesn't feel true, a gesture that feels false, a moment that doesn't ring emotionally honest. He will halt everything until it's fixed. That perfectionism can be frustrating, but it is also why his performances feel so precise and alive. Early in his career, his look and presence shaped the kinds of roles he was offered. He always seemed older than he was, more confident, more composed, less vulnerable. That made him perfect for characters who were in control, manipulative, or morally ambiguous. Over time, that became his brand. The smug, rich kid, the seductive villain, the charming sociopath, the brilliant, dangerous mind. That image stuck. Even when he tried to play softer or more innocent characters, people still saw something unsettling underneath. He has talked about going into auditions for gentle roles and being told afterward that he scared them. That gap between who he is and who people think he is has followed him his entire career. So he leaned into it. He embraced being the man audiences love to hate. From Pretty in Pink to Boston Legal to The Blacklist to Secretary to Ultron, he became the face, or the voice, of intelligence, danger, and moral complexity. It is a strange kind of stardom. He is famous, but not everywhere. Celebrated, but not constantly visible. Respected, but rarely mainstream. And as of now, there are no upcoming film projects waiting in the wings.